Okay, so I just had lunch and I just walk around the city a little bit. It's just such a beautiful city. It's amazing. I just walk around the block and there's at least probably 5 things I can paint. It's just truly amazing. I'm gonna have such a hard time to pick what I'm going to paint on location. I am going to take quite a few of the photos though, so I can paint at home with all the reference that I take. So because the audio on the video is not really audible because it's so noisy on the street and I didn't talk loud enough, so I'm going to record a voiceover. I really like the shadow shape on the right and that goes across the street into the car on the left, I believe. I feel that it really connects the shape together. So if I can resolve the left and able to kind of get rid of some of the details and make it a big major shape, that will be great, because I really like the rooftop on the distant buildings. I think those are really nice shape, so I am just going to do a really quick sketch on that. So here I am doing a quick sketch with Procreate on my iPad. I'm trying to get used to how it works. This is probably like the first one I do it outdoor. But it's very convenient. I can just pull it out and pull out my Apple Pencil and I can start to do sketching really quickly. This is done in probably about 15 minutes or so. I just really want to get a big picture down and get a composition down. So when I take this sketch and a photograph home, I have a good idea what did I have in mind when I was doing the sketch there, so I can kind of follow my original vision there. So here's the finished drawing. Very rough, but I like the composition, how it turns out. Okay, so that was that. It's just a quick sketch. I'm still trying to get used to iPad Pro. I mean, it is nice and convenient, but I'm still trying to get used to that, so the drawing might come out a little bit messy, but should be enough to get the point across. Those are not for sale or anything, it's just for my own reference and get the feeling of the lighting and the place. So this should be good. Hopefully the next one will turn out better. But let's continue on. Here it is in another scenery that I really like. This one, the audio is even worse because there's a construction behind me, so it's very, very loud. So it's a better idea that I do a voiceover for this part anyways. So I like the street scenery, and this is actually a good example that I'm able to do a more of a horizontal orientation painting. I like the buildings on the right. Again, those silhouettes, some stuff going on the rooftop, those are really nice. But again, this is about the big shape. I like the big shape of the tree and building, and that connects to the shadows. And I like how the car just kind of lining up there. So I start to do the sketching again. So this time I was just trying to lay out the basic shape first, very, very rough. And I just go in and try to further refining those and give it a little bit more details and value. And at the end of the time lapse, there's a pop. I don't know what happened with Procreate, but all of a sudden you just kind of skip a section of what I did and just kind of jump to the very end. So anyways, it's not really important. So the important thing is I want to show you the process of this, because I don't really do this all the time. Not with every painting that I do, but I certainly have this sort of composition in mind before I start painting. If I don't process it and make it into my own composition and shape in my painting, I'm most likely going to fail the painting because I didn't really think about it. I just try to copy everything that I see, and it usually kind of falls apart at the end. So here's the finished drawing. Okay, so another painting done, but the problem of Apple Pencil is that because I'm holding the tablet with my hand, so sometimes the tilt of the pencil it doesn't register that well. It start to have like really thick lines when I'm not intended to, and when I want like thinner line, it's sometimes kind of go out of whack. But again, I get the point across. I was able to kind of design the picture the way that I wanted to. So even if it look messy, it's okay. It's for my own reference and for me to get the feel of the subject. So I still call it a success. One of the things about iPad Pro, one of the huge benefit is that nobody come behind my back and see what I'm doing. When I'm doing painting, there's always people stop behind me and ask me questions and stuff, which I don't mind. But when I'm using iPads, probably because I'm holding it so close, most of them just kind of leave me alone, just walk me past by. Okay, so it's about 8:30 p.m. when I am starting to set up my plein air to paint this. So it is definitely a really popular landmark subject. And what I really caught my eyes is the long shadow and the warm lighting and just the overall shape. I painted this scenery before, but I stepped back a lot more. So this time I'm a lot closer. So I still start with the drawing, and this drawing is a lot rougher than I do it at home because I need to get to the painting part as soon as possible. The thing about plein air is the time is not going to wait for you, right? Especially right now, the sun is rapidly setting. I cannot spend an hour doing drawings, and I shouldn't anyways. So I just pretty much get the basic shape down and pretty much put everything in place in the location that I wanted to. Again, this is why I use mechanical pencil, because it saved me so much time. It'll always retain a really nice fine point, but I don't need to sharpen the pencil or anything. And I put a bunch of 4B lead in it, so I can always have a nice sharp point with a soft lead. And here comes the first wash. I try to make it as simple as possible, so just a blue sky. And when I get to the background building, the assembly building, I try to make some warm color to it because the sun is hitting it. So I just add some warm color to it. It is the first wash, so it doesn't really matter if the warm color kind of spread out a little bit into the background, into the sky. When it dries, it will probably all fade back into almost nothing anyways. And as it comes down to the horizon, I make it a lot warmer and a little bit more redder too because the sun is setting. So I kind of want to hint that it's kind of late in the afternoon, early evening. And down to the horizon, I decided to just put the grass in. So as I come down, I just preserve the highlight for the car. The sun is coming from the right, so the cars are getting lit on the top right. So that's the highlight that I'm leaving. So after the first wash is done, I actually need to wait for it to dry. So I was actually kind of just waiting there. I don't have a hair dryer with me, so I cannot speed up the process. Luckily, it didn't take that long to dry, so I can start to work on the second wash. So start with the background buildings. The top is definitely a very important part. So I try to make that shape as delicate as I can, but it is a loose painting. I'm just trying to capture the overall atmosphere. So as I try to build up the background buildings, you can see I neglect a lot of detail. There's so much detail on it. And if I try to finish it all, I'm going to stay there forever. And the ferry is not going to wait for me. I'm not able to go home. So I just break it down to like a major shape. And as you can see, I'm pretty much trying to finish the whole background building in one wash. And by leaving some incidental highlights and some wet on wet work, I am actually able to kind of suggest some details in the back. So for the windows and the door, while the wash is still wet, I just mix a dry mixture and drop those pigments into the wet wash. And if it's dry enough, you'll retain this shape but still maintain a very soft edge, which is great for background detail because you don't want the background detail to be very prominent, but you still want to be there. So that's what you do. And I paint the tree on the left that kind of just blend into the background building. And I just come down and work on the car since that part is dry as well. I need to wait for the background building to dry in order for me to do anything on top. And that area is a big wet wash, so I need to wait for it to dry. So just working on the car. Those are really rough. And none of the car are stopping for me. They are all constantly moving. So I pretty much just kind of peek up once in a while, see if there's any car I can kind of reference from. But these are just kind of pretty generic looking car more or less. I'll try to add a little bit of color to it later, but it's the value and the shape that helps to read as a car. So I really try to wrap it up as soon as possible. This painting probably took me about 45 to an hour. Like I mentioned numerous times before, I am not really fast when it comes to painting. I don't really paint that fast. So it's definitely a challenge to me. A lot of time I don't have a lot of time to think. I just need to kind of react to it. But it still turns out alright, so I'm pretty happy with the experience and the end result. And I start to work on the figures. Again, the figures are walking all over the place, so I kind of just paint what I remember. And the figures are small because it is quite a large scenery actually. So the figures are into the distance. So it's a very important thing not to make them really big. And they're all around the same eye level. So they are all the same height in terms of their head. And now the background wash is dry. I did the statue. I paint the statue in the middle because I think that's a very important element. And I really want to separate that statue from the background. That statue is actually pretty close to the midground. And I think it would be a lot more interesting if I have the statue a lot darker. That would create the sense of depth and it will kind of just grab your eyes there as you go into the distance. So I think I made a really good call by making that statue really prominent along with the figures in the car. So the assembly building will become a backdrop. So here's the finished painting. I actually quite like this painting. It is really messy, especially the car. Like the car is all kind of out of whack. But I actually able to execute what I had in mind in terms of composition and the depths and the basic value. So if I take this home and I've taken the reference photo, I can definitely develop that into a much more finished piece.